And we are live. This is the Friday Live Hour via the Mythic Masculine. I am Ian MacKensie, founder and host of the Mythic Masculine podcast, and also mostly for this Friday Live Hour, which aims to be a little more sort of nimble and topical with certain themes and projects and things that are also relevant to this sort of frame of masculinity and supporting a culture of holistic and healed and embodied masculinity. And I'm delighted to be joined in this space today by Neil Christiansen from Sacred Sons. Welcome.
Thank you, Ian. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, part of me feels be good to share a little bit about, our initial connection before we launch into some of the latest initiative, the Sacred Sons Foundation, which is an exciting offering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing a little bit of feedback too on your side too. I wonder, I don't know if that's me or maybe if you muted maybe while I was talking, and then we can swap. Let's see what that does. Pausing for a little technical moment. I can also do it on my side. How's that? Yeah, that sounds a bit cleaner for a second. Yeah, thanks, Neil. So I believe we first met when a mutual friend reached out and let me know about what you've been doing with Sacred Sons. I mean, I'd seen the Instagram posts and the various offerings that had come out, and it seemed very impressive and potent. That the work that was being done, and this is about last October, right? Of Convergence 3, I think, was the sort of main gathering that you offer there at Liberty Arising in California. And I think through our conversations and my involvement in exploration of men's work and different organizations, that there was an invitation made for me to come and check out what you guys are on about. And I will say that it was a very powerful weekend for me. I'd been doing men's work for about 5 or 6 years at that point, things like Mankind Project and other spaces. And I found, which was really, a real beautiful weaving of a lot of different elements that I hadn't actually seen before. I somewhat jokingly, thought of it as like a man fest, or like a festival for men that, and even initially before we started, after I'd arrived in a beautiful location, stunning landscape there with the rocks and the sand and the desert, that there was this sense of hesitation around, I was about to step into a field of 3 days or so with only men. And again, I had spent a lot of time in men-only spaces, but there was still the sense of like, what are we going to do? And I will say that that soon gave way on the day one, after we dropped in the beautiful container that was created. Really felt the sense of excitement of like, yeah, 3 days with only men, so exciting. And you can unmute now too if I like your reactions too. But there we go. Yeah, and so yeah, it was a very powerful weekend that still, I'm still appreciating and learning from. And I wrote an article about it after, which was titled "Sacred Sons and the Rise of the Embodied Masculine," I believe, which seemed to be shared fairly widely, and men appreciated it, and hopefully captured a bit of that alchemy and that lightning in a bottle that was offered there. And since then, I feel like I've become friends with the co-fathers, Jason and Adam and Aubert, and certainly you had a big deal with me being there, and just in general a feeling of just being an ally to the efforts of Sacred Sons, because I feel like we are so kindredly aligned in our efforts. Yeah. And so anyway, so that's a bit of an introduction to my connection with you, and I'd love to share a little bit more with the listeners, how you came to your own work with Sacred Sons.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I'm so happy. We say there's no I in men's work. We're all in this collective movement, if you will, together. So it's been great to weave and dance with you and see you bringing your passions and skill sets through in support of the mission of Sacred Sons, and just in support of healthy masculinity. So my story, if I want to go back a ways, is ever since I was a child, even, it felt like something was missing through connection to my own sensitivity in the friends group friends groups that I was attracting in my life.
Mm.
So I was labeled, let's say, in school and around circles as like, oh, Neil's the sensitive one. And so through the process of that exploration of looking into my emotions and asking myself the deeper questions of why and for what reason, and going into that added level of awareness of life is more than what it seems. I felt it was a very individual path, right? I was on the yogic path. I was finding my disciplines in connection to nature and solitude. But not until I sat in a men's circle for the first time in San Diego, which was the first local men's circle that Sacred Sons had, and it was hosted by Jason and Adam and Albert, had I realized like, wow, like that thing that I felt was missing in my relationships with my brothers, my friends, was this very experience of being vulnerable, of being real, of sharing how I'm truly feeling behind a lot of the fronts, the masks of, for me, my mask for a lot of my life was I have it all figured out. I have the beautiful girlfriend. I have the great job. I'm committed. I'm purposeful. I'm athletic. All of this, but underneath that, there was a whole nother story that I never shared with anyone. So it wasn't something that I knew existed until I experienced it. So that's how men's work found me, and specifically Sacred Sons. I feel each group of men or individual that's in the men's work space has a flavor that accompanies the experiences that they provide. And Sacred Sons for me was like, okay, these are my guys, right? Like these are the bros I can roll with, because my projection is we go as deep and as far as our own limitations make possible. So unlike maybe other men's groups that are sitting in a circle in chairs and discussing what they're doing, like we're on the ground in getting muddy and dirty and like feeling the depth of our souls, of our heart connection, of our place in this world, and making commitment through, it's just not one small body or group of people within Sacred Sons, but it's an entire ecosystem of men that we bring through for the convergences, and we bring through for our other offerings to support the work of Sacred Sons. So my own role within Sacred Sons early on, we joke amongst the four of us, Jason, Adam, Albert, myself, like I was the band manager. So every good band needs the man or woman who is moving them along to the next step, the next stage. Whether it's simple email communications that I've handled over the years, or strategic planning about where are we going next. We need to get a schedule, guys. Last event was great, but we also need a schedule. We also need to be planning out ahead. Yeah. So my role has shifted and changed throughout the times based off of the needs that have come up for Sacred Sons, and until these last few months, where it's been a foundational commitment for Sacred Sons to create the Sacred Sons Foundation. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're at now, and that's where my role, where I'm really stepping into this role as foundation director.
That's a great arc. And before we jump into the foundation, then, I mean, I'd love to just touch on one point you made, which is what do you feel is the unique, possibility that comes through in men-only spaces that is distinct in, say, other spaces or mixed gender spaces? Because I've experienced it, many times, I feel. And I'm always curious how others articulate what it is about men-only spaces that allows for certain things to come forth, whether it's vulnerability and shadow or whatever that is. I would just love for you to describe it in your own terms. Men-only spaces, for me, and maybe for first
it's important to remember as a first timer, the medicine that I received from it, it was that release, that sense of clarity that I'm not alone, because there's a group of men that are experiencing their lives. Yes, the facts, the details of the stories that are happening in their lives may be different, but the feelings that we're all experiencing are so succinctly connected. In knowing that, yes, I know as a human that we're all in this together and we're all going through our own challenges, but to actually experience and witnessing other men sharing how they experience life and what they're going through, there's a bond that forms in a men's only space, because we are working through different things than women are. Right? Like one big thing that comes up is feeling like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. If there isn't a man who hasn't felt that, I'd love to meet him. And being able to share that with brothers for the first time, it takes that weight off. It's a release. It's almost like the valve of energy that is built up in me needs outlets. It needs releases. Some of those releases are, I love surfing, so I go surfing. I just went running this morning. I meditate. I do yoga. I eat good food. I listen to music. But the greatest release of that pressure valve of energy that I've experienced is around a group of men, in holding space for me, because the collective witness of having a group of men witnessing me in my process, holding my energy, is not something that a surf session can substitute. You know, and it's truly medicine. It's truly medicine.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. And before as well, you know, we dive into foundation, I'd be curious for you to articulate a little bit of how the evolution of Sacred Sons has gone, you know, from maybe an initial idea and sort of localized offerings to the convergence, and then, you know, to the foundation. I'd love for you to just share a bit of that story.
Yeah, so this is from Neil's lens, right?
Yeah.
From the
band manager lens.
Yeah, band management lens. So the band management lens is, we've always known from the very beginning, it's like this is something special. This is something special because we are being impacted. First and foremost, it starts with me. Like I know Sacred Sons is special because the impact it's having in my life, in my circles, with my family, my friends outside of Sacred Sons, the work that I'm putting in with my parents, the ways that I'm seeing my father being vulnerable with me. I'm like, oh wow, like this is truly medicine. And so that has been the fuel, let's say, the fuel for what's driven us to go layers deeper into this work. And so what I've experienced, and it's been challenging for me because I'm the type that really likes structure and a clear path, and like, okay, let's go. This is the next step, followed by the next step, and let's go in this direction. And that can inhibit the emergence of what I've experienced within Sacred Sons. So Sacred Sons has really continues to emerge new life through new offerings in new ways by which we are creating pathways for men to connect and young men to connect with us in real time. So that's the biggest through thread that I've experienced being the band manager of Sacred Sons, is allowing the emergent nature of this organization to come through, because that's far more impactful than Neil's plan or Jason's plan or Adam's plan, Albert, Kevin, all of us, right? Because if we haven't been holding on to this idea of where we're going next, it doesn't suffocate what we're doing.
Mm.
So this journey, these two years plus that I've been on, it's been like, this is where we are, guys. And it's based off of a lot of different conditions. Like, hey, 2020, this is where we are with the pandemic. Like, what's going to emerge from this?
Mm.
And quite literally, that what emerged from that is us all living in Hawaii now.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, right? This was not the plan. This is if I when I wrote, like, I put together a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for the organization as the band manager,
Mm-hmm.
and living in Maui with my family in this way that we're living with, like what we're doing in Sacred Sons, was never the plan. So I would say emergent creation has been the theme for the organization from the beginning.
Wow. And tracking a little bit of the collective living situation there, one, I mean, it's amazing to be in that close collaborative relationships, I think, with each other, because I do think that, working with dispersed teams or ones that are together, I mean, there are certain just magic that happens, right, when you're in close proximity, which, I think is a sort of village-ish intelligence, right, that, humans have been organized in such a fashion forever. So it's interesting that pandemic, as you say, created the opportunity for the capacity for you guys to be all together, to probably be in a more intensive, creative collaborative process, right, than maybe had been in the past. And I'm curious then, so where did the foundation come from in these times, and from what sort of recognition or impulse of this emergent process?
Yeah, 1 second. I'm gonna shut the door so the outside noise isn't coming in.
Sure.
Yeah, so the emergent nature of the foundation at this time comes through really through the development of our son's youth mentorship program. So Trevor Spring, who has a lot of experience working with teenage boys or teenage young men, he recognized, and we've always recognized, that, like, what's the greatest expression of this work, masculine alchemy, that we can have in the world, and that's going to be to work with the future generations. Mm-hmm. And so it came online that as the world was shutting down and locking down and schools were closing, and as you and I know, like, retreating to our rooms as confused teenage boys is something that we are all prone to at that time of understanding ourselves and discovering our emotions. It became almost imperative that we met the need to create space for these young men to connect with each other in ways that were not about isolation. Because they are, it's 2020, no, it's 2021, and these young men are sitting behind their screens most of the day, in a way intoxified by some unhealthy outlets of using their devices. So that happened about 9 months ago. Was the first cohort of a group of young men from around the world that meet weekly to connect and just hold space for one another and model healthy masculinity. These young men are coming from underserved communities or family environments where they do not have perhaps a strong father figure or a healthy role model in their lives. And so through the process of that, we're like, and because of the response we were receiving from the parents, which was astounding. Like, yes, this is not only what my son needed, but now I am experiencing as a parent the impact that this is having on their life. We fast-tracked the the identification of this work within the framework of a nonprofit. And because of my background and the work that I've done with nonprofits over the years, it was almost like, let's turn this next page and let's have that be that, because we're ready. The world's ready. We're ready because the work that we're doing is philanthropic or altruistic in many senses. But specific to the youth mentorship program and the growth of our scholarship fund, like Sacred Sons, the organization, is ready to have a branch that is committed to raising funds for populations of underserved people that deserve to be in these spaces. And that's how Sacred Sons Foundation was birthed, in a way. And where we're at now is we're at the first chapter of developing this foundation.
Beautiful. And I understand then, so what are the main initiatives then of the foundation?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Ian. So the main initiatives, which we're calling our commitments, are the Sons Youth Mentorship Program, where we're working with young men ages 11 to 19 in both virtual containers, and then in the future via the fundraising initiative that we have online, we'll be leading a group of men into a wilderness expedition for a week when the world opens back up a bit more. And that's focused is simply put is creating a lasting impact on the next waves of masculine energy on this planet through creating deeper connection amongst young men to one another, through experiencing mentors that model vulnerability, that model expressing their emotions, that model a true sense of connection that we experience in our own men's circles. And then the second commitment is our FAM, For All Men scholarship program. And that is something we've been doing since the very first offering. We've always scholarshiped men from underserved communities, those experiencing financial hardship, men from the BIPOC community, to come to our offerings, because men's work is about representing all men, right? All colors, all ethnic backgrounds, all environments, urban, suburban, rural. It's really important that Sacred Sons, and this has been a commitment of ours since the beginning, that we as an organization are representing the whole of the world and all the beautiful colors of masculinity. So our FAM commitment is 1 in 5 men at every one of our offerings, both in person and online, will always be a scholarshiped man. Will always come from these communities. And equally so within the Sons Youth Mentorship Program, we're committed to a 1-for-1 scholarship. So for every young man whose parents have the financial means to pay for their son, we also ask them to gift a scholarship to another young man. And then the foundation, a key piece that the foundation brings through that allows us to continue to grow these scholarship programs is it's creating avenues for individuals to support this work by sponsoring these young men and men to come to our offerings. And as a 501c3 nonprofit, we're able to receive donations on behalf of these programs.
Very cool. I mean, and what are some of the transformations that you've been seeing, particularly from some of the young men that have participated already in the program?
Yeah, so I'm not in the program, so to speak. So a lot of this is reflection through Trevor Spring, who's the program director, and Trevor is so lit up by it. the impact that he's experiencing these young men having from, and we experience it in men's circles too, is there's a lot of trepidation within first relating with the young men, a lot of like sizing up, like, what is this all about? Essentially, like, what did my parents sign me up for? Like, I don't know about this, but over the course of the calls and over the course of the program, like they're growing deeper into their truest essence, right? They're finding a sense of who they are in the world, in helping shape them as stewards of the future. So Trevor, what he always reflects to us is like, we just don't know how far this is going, right? We don't know the ripples of change that are going to come through this work over time, because it's like innumerable the ways by which this can impact a young man's life. Specifically because it's such a tender age where we're all trying to fit in and belong. And there's so many outlets, like, right? There's so many outlets where these young men can be preyed on by wanting a sense of belonging and finding toxic outlets, right? Gangs, addiction. There's a lot of there's a lot of things I remember as a young man that I could have been on the wrong side of the tracks, or many times, and nobody was there to say to me, "Hey, Neil, like, you should really think about if you should engage in this or not." It was left up to me. And I come from an affluent, loving environment with my parents, so I had a good, a decent compass, let's say, for my choices. But we need to consider, like, other young men who don't have a father figure and are looking in their community, on their streets, for like who is considered, who is modeling popularity, or who is liked within the community. In some of these communities, that individual could be making very poor decisions. And without the understanding of different realities existing, and that's a big thing that comes through for these young men too, is they're connecting with other young men, so they're recognizing that the other realities that exist outside of their own. That's really good medicine for them, is to relate to other young men that look different than them, and realize, like, oh, like, that's how you live? Interesting.
That's beautiful. I mean, it makes me think too about how the boys or the young men become these cells of also modeling to their peer group, right? That and often I think that's what it takes, that, the ripple effect of a younger man being able to see modeled, authenticity and vulnerability and courage in these different forms. And then they once they experience it, I find that's typically the case. Once you experience something that's possible, it becomes harder to pretend that you've never seen it or experienced it. Like it always stays there shimmering as like, oh, that's possible. And maybe I think particularly for men, maybe that they really have to see models, as you said, of ways of being to show a kind of aspirational possibility. And I think also there's something interesting about how, often fathers obviously have a massive impact on the youth, on the son, and yet at the same time, it's like, how necessary it is to have other models of masculinity that are not the father, right? Because, I have a young son. I mean, you have a young child as well. It's like, we certainly play a massive role, but it's like we're very limited in just one form of expression of masculinity, and with lots of nuance. But how vital it is, and how I would say, if I think back even to my parents, like, even my father, I never really recall him even having that many friends. certainly there were some friends in like the music community and that, but not to the extent that there were other male adults around that had any influence on me. Like that was actually, when I think back now, such an absence. Whereas, if I had had a possibility of encountering a group of men that were doing this kind of work and offering it up, yeah, what a difference that would have made, in my own kind of needing to seek it out, over the next decade and a half, and suddenly encounter this stuff for the first time at like 35, right? Which, again, that's changing now, certainly with these younger generations because of the access to what's out there. But I just think that is powerful to name that, how necessary and vital it is for younger men in particular to encounter these different ways of modeling masculinity, and that they become these transformational imaginal selves within their own peer groups and communities.
Yeah, wow. There's so many touch points that came through as you shared that. One thing I'd say is we burden ourselves as fathers, as men, to carry the weight or responsibility of showing up as the sole role model for boys in this world, and it shouldn't be that. One thing I always speak to for my daughter is I want my daughter to feel comfortable in the world around. I want her to discern like danger versus safety for sure. But at the same time, I want her to feel comfortable out in the world around whomever, because the only way for me to bring that message through for her is if I create opportunity for her to be around people that aren't mom or dad. Mm-hmm. And the more time she's locked into relationship with mom and dad as being the models of femininity and masculinity, the more insecure she'll feel outside of the cellular bubble of our family. Mm-hmm. So these young men, and I experienced it for myself as a teenager, like they need and they deserve to be surrounded by many men that have their best interests in mind. Mm-hmm. And most older men who attract or prey on young men to, let's say, join a group, a gang, let's say, they don't have the best interest of these young men in mind, right? They're not thinking about the emotions of these young men and the impact that they're going to have on their lives. So it's really important that at these thresholds that we find ourselves as, from going from boys to young men to men, that the programming that we're receiving is bringing us closer to our hearts, closer in connection with each other, instead of into the dog-eat-dog world that we know as toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. And that now I'm on my own, I think that's also a problematic cause of you're a man now. Mm-hmm. Like that story creates separation, creates loneliness. It isolates us from connection with one another, because you're a man, you should be out, you should be taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. That's an outdated program that we're hoping to shift through the work of our youth program.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I'd love to hear then. I know you're in the middle of I think like a specific fundraising initiative right now, right? That there is like a target set and sort of an impact in mind. And maybe you could speak more clearly to what that ask is right now.
Yeah. Right now we're running an online campaign. It's our first fundraiser. It's called Our Future Initiative. And we are raising funds for our Sons Youth Mentorship Program and our For All Men Scholarship Program. And the focus is to create hundreds of opportunities for both young men and men to be part of this work. So every contribution is going towards a scholarship that will provide access to our experiences for young men and men who otherwise wouldn't have the financial means to be part of the brotherhood.
Mm.
This is our goal is $77,000. We are looking to those that support us, that resonate and align with this message, to make even a small contribution, small as $33, can really shift and impact the lives of the individuals that will benefit from this fundraiser. And this is just the beginning, really. This is us cementing or creating the foundation of support that will carry us into the next wave of emergent creation through the foundation.
Beautiful. And so it is the best way for people to contribute to go to sacredsonsfoundation.org?
Yeah. So for those that are like, yes, I'm in, I want to support this work, I love what these guys are doing, because really one aspect of our work is there's not every single man or woman, right? There's many women support this work, but they're not going to be able to attend a Sacred Sons event. So this is our ask to you, if you are on board with this work and what we're doing, to drop into sacredsonsfoundation.org and follow the links on the homepage to our fundraiser. It's Our Future Initiative. And what you'll see there, it's set up as a crowdfunding website, similar to GoFundMe. So for every contribution, the contributor receives something in exchange for their contribution. So even at the $33 level, you get a really dope sacred symbol that we created as a token of appreciation for you guys. And each level going up has different perks. So if someone wants to join Convergence 5 in April, as well as gift a scholarship to another man, they would contribute double the ticket price of Convergence 5.
Nice. Yeah, I actually found the direct fundraiser website, which I put in the chat box or the comments thread. So for whoever's watching as well, you can see it there. Hopefully that link works. Otherwise, yeah, you can head to sacredsonsfoundation.org and follow the links there. Yeah, I really appreciate this, Neil. I mean, really powerful to see the real commitment to, on the ground impact, particularly for, again, those from underserved populations and youth, which, is in some ways is a real marker of a sense of like what matters. And I think oftentimes it is necessary for those from older years, the olders, who maybe never had these kinds of things to do the work, obviously is really important. But sometimes that can also lead to a kind of self-referential, never-ending quest of personal growth.
Yeah.
Which is sort of often characterized as like the wellness industry as a whole. That there's always a new horizon of bettering yourself, and in some ways I think one can get stuck in this, well, I got to be even more better before I can actually start to make impact elsewhere, and again, it's like the horizon just recedes forever, because you can always find something to better in yourself. But I appreciate this sense, with Sacred Sons, that there's foundational work that can be done and has been done and offered, and a clear shift into recognizing that, it really starts earlier, at a time when, maybe ancestrally, like peoples, from my line, Scotland and Ireland and England and all these, maybe, pre sort of colonized eras, would have had these kinds of things, these initiatory entrances for youth, for younger men into, the bigger story of what it means to be alive, to be connected, to be oriented in service towards life, rather than, into a culture that is so much of domination, built on domination. So yeah, I really appreciate the focus and the commitment. It feels, that you really bring a lot of that sort of vitality, to this quest.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian. I resonate deeply with everything that you shared, and this is these young men specifically are transitioning through a period of time that is pivotal in determining the course of their lives. And it's our responsibility as men who have learned from our mistakes, because we are alone in the process of making those same decisions. I feel it's my responsibility, our responsibility to see that as many young men as possible are ushered into this next phase of their life in a good way. And what we're saying within this foundation is the world feels so uncertain. It's always been uncertain. We've never known what's happening ahead. But even specifically this year, it's like enough of this uncertainty. The future is in our hands. We decide what we want to see for this world. And the foundation is the start of that.
Yeah, beautifully said. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we close the conversation today?
Nope. I feel complete, clear, aligned. Thanks again, Ian, for creating the space for me to share about the foundation. And once again, $33 or more can go a long, long way in this world. So let's start making those waves count.
Maybe so.
Yes.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate our time today. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll be sharing this far and wide as well after the fact. So
yeah.
All right, brother.
Peace and love.